welcome to The Skinny for Friday, December 13th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined today, as always, every Friday morning with my colleagues Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief of Creative Loafing newspaper, and Ben Montgomery, author and independent reporter. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mitch.
Hi, Mitch. How are you?
Great to be here. Getting over the Niners loss last night.
Sorry about that.
Man.
Yeah, I know.
Why do they make you watch football on a Thursday,
let's
man?
remind people we have fans representing the Minnesota Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, and the Detroit Lions in the room. Three teams from the NFC North, which is the best division by far.
Our guest is from the Michigan area. We'll get into that. But first, we talk on the show later on the show, we're talking about ranked choice voting, which you may or may not know about. Florida lawmakers actually banned that alternative form of voting a couple of years ago, and it was on the ballot in several states last month where it lost. But advocates remain convinced it's the best form of selecting our elected representatives, and it's how elections are decided in places like New York City, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Oakland, Cambridge, and Maine, and Alaska as well. So we'll talk to the man who's trying to get that happening in Florida. But first, we do want to welcome to the studio once again Pinellas County Democratic State Representative Lindsay Cross back here on The Skinny. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. And of course, Lindsay Cross won her second two-year term representing St. Pete and Pinellas Park in the Florida House of Representatives last month, defeating Republican Ed Montanari by 8 points, 54 to 46%. That was despite the Republican Party of Florida is making a strenuous effort to defeat her. Lindsay is a native of the Detroit suburbs and a Colorado State University grad. She came to Florida in the early aughts to work as an environmental scientist because she said this is a place to practice that profession and make a difference here. And she certainly is. She's been involved in environmental causes with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, with the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and with Florida Conservation Voters. So, Lindsay, again, thank you for coming. Let's talk about the biggest thing I think you have to be dealing with the last few months, and that is, of course, the hurricanes that rocked the Bay Area, rocked Florida, and really has nailed St. Petersburg and Pinellas County. Just tell us, what's the latest on the ground in terms of recovery when you talk to constituents?
Certainly. So that's something that's impacted our area in a way that we've never experienced before. And the recovery process is still going on. The city has committed to having the debris picked up within 90 days, and that's consistent with FEMA reimbursement and will allow taxpayers not to have to take on that burden. But it's a significant process because there are literally thousands, over 10,000 residents that were flooded in St. Petersburg, as well as significant tree canopies that came down and damaged people's properties. So I think our cities and our county are trying to do the best that they can and work as efficiently and expeditiously as they can. But no cities are ever prepared for something of this magnitude. And so we're just continuing to educate the residents about ways that they can help to, support this process, things that they need to do for their rebuilding and recovery, and just make sure that we're trying to build back safer and more resilient in the future.
There is a lot of talk about FEMA, of course, FEMA reimbursement. Hearing a lot, Lindsay, about the 49%, or I guess it's a 50% rule. And there's also the 110% rule. Can you tell our listeners what those are and why these become issues here?
Sure. So the 50% rule is a FEMA federal regulation. In St. Petersburg, we actually use the 49% rule. So that means that if someone's property is damaged, let's say the house had a value of $200,000 the day before the hurricane, and the property was flooded, and it's going to cost $105,000 to bring that property back to the level it was before the hurricane. That's not making improvements. That's just putting the flooring back, the cabinets, the drywall. If it costs more than that 49%, that homeowner is going to be required to bring it up to current building code and standards. So for a lot of the communities that were impacted, like Shore Acres and Snell Isle, we have a lot of homes that were built in a style that's called slab on grade. And so whatever that elevation of the land is, you're maybe getting a couple inches above that. Homes that are built more recently, and even some that were built a century ago. My home is over 100 years old, and it's elevated several feet, has a crawl space. But many of the homes that were built kind of the middle of the century were this slab on grade. It was less expensive, but it's not providing homeowners with any buffer when there's flooding events. So if a home is deemed to surpass that 49%, they're going to have to either elevate the home or tear down that home and rebuild at the the current standards. So that becomes a financial burden for people. But the reason why that policy is in place is to make sure that we're not building back in the same way and continuing to put people in harm's way. And so for homeowners, I know it can be really disheartening and frustrating because it's more expensive and there's not enough support. Grant programs like we have through FEMA take a long time. There's very few people that actually get the money. And so you're giving people really no good alternatives or good options. You're just saying, well, sorry, you surpassed this percentage point, so you have to take on a lot of this financial burden to come into compliance.
Right. You talk about now, there's some state programs. There's the Residential Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. I've heard about that. Do you know much about that?
I don't know the specifics of that program, but through the Florida Department of Emergency Management, there's a new program called Elevate Florida, which is going to have direct assistance for residents in terms of rebuilding and elevating homes, potentially even some type of buyout program. And we're still learning details about that, but I'm excited to see the state take some leadership under the direction of Kevin Guthrie at the state level. And so I think one of the things we need to be doing is looking at how we can kind of bring some of those funding sources together and provide resources for our residents, but also look at the type of planning we need to do for the future so that, you know, the Shore Acres of tomorrow is not going to look like the way it was in the past. But we don't want to have investors just coming through, lowballing people, giving them, you know, just a small amount of money because they don't have any other options, and making it so that those neighborhoods are completely unaffordable.
Well, Shore Acres, I know, is in your district, and I know you deal a lot with the folks down there. Are people saying they're going to move out? I mean, what is the course? I mean, some people can't do that, don't want to do that, but we're hearing people, you know, obviously these storms were so devastating, and it seems like it is going to cost a lot of money to raise them up, and that's really, some people say, you know, environmentally, that's the only way it's going to maybe prevent damage again, because we're going to get these storms again.
Mm-hmm. I think everyone's situation is unique. There's some people that have gone through a few floods, or maybe it was the first time and it was incredibly traumatic. And so you can't underscore how important the toll on people's mental health and, you know, their feeling of safety and security. And so for some people, a buyout may be the best thing for them to do, and they're going to look at other places to live. But there's many people who would love to have more assistance to elevate their homes, or to build a second story on top, or to look at demolition and rebuilding in those communities, because they live in those areas because they love their neighbors and the sense of community that provides. But it's not a one size fits all, but we do need to have, I think, more options for people.
Can I switch gears a little bit? I'm curious, I don't know how much you're going to talk about this session here, but I believe you're a supporter of Amendment 2, aka the push to really enshrine the so-called right to fish and hunt in the Constitution. That's correct, right? Obviously, it's important to make sure that the FWC is well-funded. My kid just got his lifetime license because of that discount. That was awesome. And I think that 94 ban on the gill nets will still stand. But what do you tell people, now that it's passed, what do you say to constituents who are looking for assurances that the language in the amendment won't open the door to, like, bear hunting with hounds and body crushing traps, snares, and things like that?
Well, that is a shift. Yeah.
I didn't tell her we were talking about that.
Sorry. Well, you know, it was your support of it that really made me actually consider the other sides and really think about the FWC and how
right, because the Sierra Club had come out
really
against that,
yeah.
and I asked you about that, Lindsay, beforehand, right? Because a lot of environmentalists didn't support that,
and I think that'll be the challenge now. How do we protect, you know, to their concerns? What do we say to them?
So my support for that amendment was because I think we need to look at conservation holistically. And we need to have environmentalists. We also need to have the sportsman community supporting that. One of the biggest reasons that we have issues is because we don't have enough protected land, or we don't have the appropriate management of that land, or we're not implementing strategies like having bear-proof trash cans. There's a lot of things that we can do on the funding and the policy side to make sure that even as our population grows, we can support native wildlife like the Florida black bear and like the Florida panther. You know, we had a record year for panther deaths. And so those are statistics that we don't want to see. It's important that we continue to give our state agencies like the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission the tools and the resources to do the science, to understand the populations that we have. The proposal earlier this week by the commission to look at having a hunt of black bears, I believe is going to be wildly unpopular with the people of Florida. And I don't think that the science will bear it out. And that's the job of FWC, is to look at what the science is telling them. What is the population? What should the population be in Florida based on the conservation and, accessible lands that they have right now? And if we're not at those numbers, there's no way that we should be allowing a hunt. The idea behind having a right to hunt and fish is to continue to give people access to the resources and to do things that, help to support a broader conservation mission. But killing animals for trophy hunting in a population that may already be strained is not consistent with that.
We are speaking with Democratic State Representative Lindsay Cross from Pinellas County. We have her to about 11:25, so we want to get through a few more questions. What about the session is starting in March? I don't know if you filed any bills officially yet. We're seeing some bills being introduced for the session, 2025 session. Can you give us a hint about what you might be filing?
So my bills are really going to focus on hurricane recovery, environmental protection, and support for public safety this year. Things in direct response to what we saw from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Last year I sponsored a bill to expand the My Safe Florida Home program to not just be for wind mitigation, but to expand into flood mitigation. And I think it's still a really important and relevant bill that we provide some support for homeowners to make proactive improvements to their properties to reduce their risk of flooding. It's not going to solve it if we're having 10 foot of storm surge from a category 4 or 5 hurricane, but in communities like Shore Acres or Riviera Bay, where sea level rise and other climate change impacts is fundamentally changing the amount and frequency of flooding, we need to have some tools for people. That may be doing some flood proofing on their homes. It may be commercial flood barriers or improving drainage on their properties. And so if we're encouraging people to be safer when it comes to windows and doors and roofs, we should also be providing some support in terms of those homeowner grants for flooding mitigation.
I don't have to tell you that the Democrats are in the super minority in both the legislature and both the Senate and the House. And you lost one member of the House caucus this past week, Susan Valdez from Hillsborough County here. That shocked seemingly everybody here. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's really disingenuous to the people who voted for her. Susan has been a part of the community, and there may be, there are people on both sides of the aisle that voted for her, but they voted for a person they believed had values consistent with the Democratic Party. And there are some very fundamental differences between the Republican and the Democratic Party. And so to say, well, I got elected as a Democrat, but I've got 2 years and I want to get a little bit more done. I think first and foremost, when you enter the political process, you need to be clear about who you are and what your values are, communicate that to the voters, and then vote in a way that's consistent with that.
Patrick Mantega, who works with Susan Valdez, wrote in his column, and like I said this morning, he says, we also heard she was told that since they already had a supermajority, i.e. the Republicans, she could vote her conscience on the social issues, that they're going to deliver state funding to projects in her district if she switched parties. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Yeah, okay. No comment there.
All right. I was going to ask a similar question.
By the way, let's remind people that if you want to join this conversation, shoot us an email, dj@wmnf.org, or call us at 813-239-9663.
Yeah, and again, we just, I think for 5 more minutes or so, we have Susan Valdez. We don't have her. We have Lindsay Cross here. Lindsay, You talked about this thing with the Bears a moment ago, FWC. Let's go about state parks, okay? I know I saw you went with a protest, I think it was back in September, regarding Honeymoon Island. That was one of the listed parks that looked like there might be new programming going on there. And you must be happy to see, I think it's a Stewart Republican, Gail Harrell, has already filed legislation called the State Park Preservation Act that would stop the construction of golf courses, pickleball courts, tennis courts, and ball fields at state parks. That should be like pretty much a winner, right? When it gets introduced, yeah. What we don't really still know the derivation of like where this all came from, but it was one of the rare times we've seen Republicans, Democrats, and everybody else. And again, old school. Like you talk about environment, you came down here for that. I remember I was here when I moved here in 2000. That was like sacred. Republicans, Democrats, you didn't do stuff on the environment. That has changed. I think it began under Rick Scott and a little bit under Ron DeSantis as well. Even though he's done some good things as well on that part. How do you see? In all the decades you've been here, back here, Florida, how the legislature deals with the environment on like land all the issues that you care about?
Well, I think Florida voters have been consistent in supporting land and water conservation, whether it's amendments at the county level or the amendment that passed back in 2014, securing funding from the Land Acquisition Trust Fund, from documentary stamp revenues. Floridians love their parks. They love access to our water resources, and they consistently vote to tax themselves to protect and conserve more land and water. I don't see anything about that changing. Conservation at the state level, while we've had some wins in the past few years with the passage of the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act and a little bit more funding, it's not at the level that it should be. We came from program Florida Forever and Preservation 2000, where year after year, $300 million was going to conservation. If we put that into today's dollars, I think it's closer to $700,000 or $800,000, and we haven't come close to matching that. So when we look at a state that is continuing to have population growth, our number one economic driver in the state of Florida is population growth. To make sure that we are balancing that with the need for clean water and supporting wildlife species and having access to nature, we need to have significantly more investment in conservation and management of our lands. And the people of Florida came out very strongly against that kind of sneak attack on our state parks. And I think we have a really good chance of enshrining some more protections through the passage of that bill this year. I'm certainly going to be involved in it and one of the fiercest advocates.
Yeah, I've heard since I moved here in 2005 that somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 people moved to Florida each day. I think that rate of growth has been sustained since then. Does there come a point at which like that is not sustainable in a place that desires to have clean air and clean water?
Well, it's not sustainable if we continue to grow the way we have been growing. If we're cutting down, pristine natural areas and putting in subdivisions that are not walkable, that are not connected to stores and schools and hospitals, that promote a very car-centric, lots of pavement. One of the reasons why we have issues with flooding, not just with storms and hurricanes, is because so much of our land area is paved over, and that's leading to higher temperatures. It's leading to more runoff, flooding in areas because we don't have the natural systems like wetlands and undeveloped areas to soak up some of that rain and that runoff. So we need to fundamentally change the way we're developing. Slight increases in density can help protect more land and water. It can lead to areas that are fundamentally more attractive and create a sense of community by bringing people a little bit closer, having more mixed-use development. But consumers aren't given a lot of those options. Mm-hmm. So we need to do better in terms of providing those choices and developing in a way that's more sustainable.
We're getting with Representative Lindsay Cross. Lindsay, I know you have to go, but we have a couple callers on the line here. Maybe we can get quickly here. Let's see here. We'll try to do that anyway. Anonymous caller from St. Petersburg. Let's see what happens here. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for the show. I'm calling about the the old Raytheon site that was an Elbit Systems site in the Tyrone Azalea area that was recently opened on October 6th for brush and debris to be taken to after the storm for public and commercial use. Are you aware that site is being monitored by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Florida Department of Health, and that the FDLP's finding was that there are many toxic chemicals on the site that are polluting the neighborhood. 3 notable chemicals that are thousands of times over the EPA limit.
I think so, yes, sir. I think, Representative Cross, you are familiar with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the debris management sites...
Thank you for the call, sir.
That's something that I think we need to be looking at a little bit more comprehensively. Cities and municipalities are encouraged to identify places prior to storms that they can take debris, and there's different classes of debris. One of the reasons why recovery has been slow is because there's only so many permitted areas that can take things like appliances or things that have hazardous chemicals in them. Some of them are in Okeechobee. Some of them are going even further than that. And that's the reason why storm debris has to be separated. But these debris management sites, there are recommendations, but not necessarily requirements to do water quality testing of the material. I'd like to see some of those regulations strengthened, but I know that our local governments are kind of in a quagmire when they've got millions of cubic yards of debris they have to mobilize and to store or get out of there. People are chomping at the bit to get back into their homes, and we don't want that washing into our waterways.
We've got the Welch piles, as they call them in St. Petersburg. A lot of debris still where I live up in northeast St. Pete, for sure.
I never liked that terminology.
I know it's kind of unfair, but
so I think it just highlights how important it is for governments to be proactive in strengthening their plans before storms and hurricanes,
right?
Because we're going to see more storms. We're going to see more intense storms. And so it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And in places that are landlocked, like Pinellas County, that are incredibly built out, it's going to be even more challenging. But that has to be part of the conversation with the residents that, there are areas that we're going to have to keep undeveloped because of emergencies. We need to take precautions to monitor this area to make sure it's not impacting public health. And having some of those safeguards in place beforehand, I think, can make the recovery process smoother and safer for everyone.
Okay, one last call before we let you go. Former Tampa City Council member John Dingfelder, who you just met when he left here. John, you're on the air. We got to go quickly here for Lindsay.
Sure. Representative, in regard to relief for homeowners who are mitigating their homes, perhaps when you get to Tallahassee, local tax relief would be a big help to homeowners like us who have been impacted. So maybe include that in your bill. Just wanted to say hi and keep up the good work.
Thank you, John.
And if you have specific ideas about what that means, give me a call.
He wants the state to preempt.
Yeah, call the representative.
I'll reach out to you. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. We've got to let her go.
Thank you for being
Pinellas
here.
County Democratic State Representative Lindsay Cross, thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny.
Please give Cooper a scratch for us.
I will, and go Lions.
All right. Again, that was Representative Lindsay Cross. Thank you so much. And we are going to pivot now. Okay. So we're going to talk now on a different subject, but about still politics, elections, and that is ranked choice voting. Are you familiar with that? Well, you're going to learn all about it here on the show here in the next half hour. So we've got on the line John Severini. He's the chairman of Rank My Choice Florida, a group committed to bring ranked choice voting to Florida. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mitch. How are you?
Great to have you here on The Skinny with us. So a couple of things we want to say about ranked choice voting to listeners, but actually let's have you tell people who have never heard the term ranked choice voting. This is an alternative form of voting in an election. It's going on in different places, but how does it actually work? John, tell our listeners that.
Okay. First, let me just correct you. The name of our organization is Rank My Vote Florida.
Right, my vote, not my rank choice. Okay, Rank My Vote Florida.
Yeah,
got it. Okay.
Rank My Vote Florida, and our website has a lot of great information. So .org after that. But
Rank My Vote.
Yeah. So ranked choice voting has been around in this country for over 100 years, used in just a handful of cities. In the last 30 years, it's really gotten traction. So what it is, it's a way for multiple candidates to run for a particular seat. And right now, it's the plurality system where whoever gets the most votes wins. Even if that person gets 35, 40% of the votes, if there's enough other candidates' votes are distributed. And so you have a winner with 35, 40% of public support, which means 65% of the people didn't vote for that candidate. So ranked choice voting is a system where you get to choose who is your first choice, and you can then pick a second and a third. So if I like an underdog, but I want to express my real preference, I like this candidate C. I know they're not going to really win, but they stand for my values. So I either waste my vote and vote for candidate C, or I can vote for candidate C, and then I can say my second choice is candidate B. And so when they do the tabulation, they look and they see, did anybody have 50% or more of the popular vote? If they did, then no tabulation is necessary. But if they didn't, then they take whoever came in last place, in this example, candidate C, and they look at everybody that voted for that candidate, who was your second choice, and they will redistribute. So my vote would go to candidate B. You might have picked candidate C, and your vote could have transferred to candidate A as your second choice. At the end of the day, one of those two candidates will have a majority. So I have to say it's complicated when you explain it. When voters use it, it's just marking a ballot, choice A, B, or C. You don't do, as a voter, you don't do any more than. So, that's the end.
Okay, great.
I can tell you the benefits of it, which are much more important.
Right. You think this is, and others do, think this is the way to go, and we've seen it embraced in cities like I said, San Francisco, New York City. Eric Adams won that way, the current mayor of New York. Minneapolis has that. But, John, it did take a blow on November 5th, the whole movement for this. It lost in several states, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, Oregon. And we can talk maybe about, why that happened in a minute. But tell us, why do you think this is a superior way that we should administer our elections?
Okay. You know what? If you don't mind, I'll circle back to that because I want to address your second point first. And it did lose in 4 states. It was very ambitious. It was ambitious. And quite honestly, changing the way we vote is a difficult task. So I'll do a deeper dive into that. But it also, at the same day, it won in 5 other municipalities. The city of Washington, D.C., and several other smaller cities. So I will tell you, until this election, ranked choice voting had a 40 or 35 wins in a row streak. Did not lose in 35 times. I got involved with this 8 years ago because the city of Sarasota approved it for local elections. At that time, there were only 12 cities in the country using ranked choice. Today, there's upwards of 60 cities. So you can see the upward trajectory. And I just want to put it in perspective. Yes, we had a bad day in November. We were hoping a few of those states would have passed it. But in the overall trend over the 8 years, we're like 40-4. So I'll take that record.
Right. And again, I just want to remind our listeners, we're talking with John Severini. He's the chairman of Rank My Vote Florida, a group committed to bring ranked choice voting to Florida. And we're talking, and we should tell voters that, or voters, listeners, and voters, that it was banned actually in Florida. The legislature did this a couple of years ago, one of those big omnibus election reform bills. There's been 3 of them since the 2020 election. Tallahassee every year, frankly, some people would say make it harder to vote for some folks. And I think, when I did a big story about this a few months ago, John, I put that in the story, and I realized that was never really debated one way or the other, the merits of it or not. As somebody who's been an advocate for a number of years on this, obviously that must have been disappointing to you that there was not really a robust discussion about that.
Yeah, thank you, Mitch. There was no debate, and yeah, we can speculate a lot as to why they chose to ban it. All we wanted, Mitch, was to allow cities to use ranked choice voting if they chose for municipal elections. So the city of Sarasota has a runoff system. They're nonpartisan elections. So if you run for mayor in Sarasota, you're not running as a Democrat or a Republican. You're Mitch Perry and you want to be our mayor. And so do 12 other people. And we had this runoff system, as do many cities, which if nobody had a majority, and usually they didn't, voters had to come back a second time. Voters don't like coming back a second time to the polls. Usually you get about a 50% drop off in voter participation. And it cost the city, in Sarasota's case, $100,000 to run this second election. So all we were asking, the citizens in Sarasota wanted it. We wanted the state to certify the tabulator module so we could use ranked choice for our city elections. We also had the city of Clearwater saying, we'd like to try this, and Gainesville. Gainesville would have saved $600,000 avoiding that runoff. Clearwater would have saved $400,000. City of Jacksonville would save $1.2 million to eliminate the runoff. The more people, the more it costs to run an election. So it made a lot of sense from a fiscal perspective. It wasn't political because these are nonpartisan candidates running. However, ranked choice voting in a couple of other states caused outcomes that the Republican Party wasn't happy with.
Right.
Although they were the popular candidate that won. I want to stress that. It wasn't the candidate. It wasn't the Republican candidate. So unfortunately, Republican Party has decided that they don't love this way of voting. And I think it's a matter of they just don't fully understand it.
Again,
let me go on to say.
Okay, sorry, John, just for a moment. I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking to John Severini from Rank My Vote Florida, and we encourage people to, if they know about this system, they like it or they don't like it, to
have you voted a ranked choice ballot before? Yeah,
813-239-9663. You can call us or you can send us an email at dj@wmnf.org. So, yeah, John, what are the arguments? And do you want to say something?
Oh, you're kind of talking about it a little bit, John. 17 years ago, Sarasota said they wanted it. Your organization itself has a long battle ahead of it. Should this one day pass, I mean, it might not be implemented in our lifetimes. It seems like. Well, how do you wrestle with that on a day-to-day as you work through your advocacy?
Yeah, so change is hard, guys. I mean, would I like to see this tomorrow? Yeah, I would. Florida's not going to be the next adopter of this. We have right now 2 states are using it. Again, in the last 8 years, we went from 12 cities to 60 cities. There are probably another 50 or 60 cities in various stages of advocacy and trying to get it approved. So there could be 100. We could have 50 million Americans using ranked choice voting in the next 5 years across the country. It's still not enough, but it's a start. We also have 2 states using it, the state of Maine, the state of Alaska. I want to tell you that both states tried to repeal it. Maine twice after it won. It won 3 times with the voters of Maine. Today, it's the way they vote for all races, including the president. In Alaska, it was approved 4 years ago, used 2 years ago for the first time. Again, all exit polls show that voters loved it. It worked great. But there was a big campaign to repeal it this year. And they almost repealed it, but they didn't.
It was super close. Very close vote there.
Yeah. again, I'll go to, so voters just don't understand it. When I explain it to people, I see this glazed look come in their eyes and I don't get it. And if you don't get it, you're not going to say, yes, I want to do this, right? So that's our purpose. So I'll circle back to, it's going to take a while. Education is key. We want to start with young people. We want to use this in school elections. It is used on college campuses, hundreds of universities, and hundreds of businesses. Actually, and I want to circle back to something, it's on the same trend. Utah has the most cities. I think there's somewhere upwards of 20 Utah cities that use ranked choice voting, and the Republican Party in Utah. Utah is a strong Republican state, but they recognize the value of this before it got political. And they saw how well it worked, and cities started adopting it. And today, it's common practice in the state of Utah. So we have to learn from that and then try to bring that message. Again, it doesn't help either party. And I will be honest, the Democratic Party hasn't embraced it either.
Maybe they should forward since it's not really working for them right now. Now, I should say, John, you mentioned people get kind of a glazed look when you talk to them about this. There was a very interesting documentary that I saw this summer called Majority Rules, which is all about the 2022 congressional election in Alaska. And that featured Sarah Palin, actually, who was running against a Democrat. I believe her name was Mary Patolta. Is that how you pronounce her last name?
Peltola.
Okay.
Peltola, yes.
Yeah.
Mary Patolta.
And she, of course, and she won that race in 22. She lost last month, we should say, to, I think, Nick Begich, I think his name is, Republican. Right. And so, there was a furious reaction by Republicans because that had been a Republican seat forever, essentially. Alaska only has one congressional seat in Congress, and they lost it under RCV. So you're right. I mean, it got partisan. They thought it would have ever happened any other way other than this ranked choice voting way. Let's get rid of it. And as you say, there was a concerted effort to do that. It was not repealed. It survived narrowly. So we do have that working now in 2 states in this country here. And we do have a phone call here. So let's bring up a caller to talk to our guest here, John Severini here. Let's see. Hi, Mike from St. Petersburg. You're on the Skinny.
Hi, is this me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me get you off speakerphone. Hi, I was just listening to your call with interest, and I want you to know that I've been a longtime friend of Anthony Lorenzo, who is the leader in the fight for
in Sarasota.
For choice voice in Sarasota. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I have a question for you. It's kind of a theoretical question, more for your guest. Going back to the 2000 election. Obviously, if we'd had ranked choice voting, probably Al Gore would have been elected in Florida, and history would have been very different. But I have lived overseas, and of course, I'm interested in voting in general. What would your guest think about the parliamentary system? Because if we had the parliamentary system, we would avoid a lot of these issues of winner-take-all elections also. And I see, for instance, in many democracies across the world, Great Britain, Italy, France, or whatever, they like the parliamentary system, and it allows a person not to waste their vote.
Excuse me, Mike, what is the parliamentary system? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, for instance, in Italy, there are about 30 different political parties.
Right.
And and you can vote for, say, the Greens, or someone like that, or the communists, or the socialists, or the fascists, if you wish. And what will happen is that at the end of the election, somebody has to form a majority.
Right.
So the
coalition government.
A coalition will form. Right. And obviously it's not utopia or nirvana, but I was just curious what your think about the relative disadvantages of that versus that type of system versus ranked choice.
Okay, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mitch, if you don't mind, I'll respond to that. And then I want to go back to Alaska that you spoke of earlier.
Go ahead.
So first of all, hey, Mike, thanks for calling in. I took over from Anthony Lorenzo, so I'm glad you were part of that campaign. And clearly, you're interested in this subject. If you're not on our database, please go to our website and add your name. And then we can talk more offline. But love the parliamentary system. It's just there's several things that have to happen in this country before we get there. There is a bill in Congress right now called the Fair Representation Act, which combines ranked choice voting and broader districts, it gets closer to the parliamentary system. So here's the biggest problem, Mitch. And I was in our Congress, 85% of the congressional districts are gerrymandered to the point where it's guaranteed either a Democrat or a Republican is going to win that district. 85%. So the whole election takes place in the primary. So the parliamentary system doesn't really address this. In the primary in this country, it's only the most hardcore voters that turn out, not your average American. And really, it's usually half of voter participation, primary versus general. So primaries select, if you're running in a Republican district, you have to be the furthest to the right to win that district, and vice versa. If you're running in a Democratic district, furthest to the left. So if you use ranked choice voting in the primary and opened it up, we would get more moderate candidates advancing to the general election. And then those candidates would go on to Congress, and I think a better opportunity to reach across the aisle. So, but the short answer to Michael is love the parliamentary system. If you think ranked choice voting is a tough sell, we got a long time to go before that. I'm going to circle back to Alaska. Mitch, you talked about 2022, first implementation of it. There were 3 candidates running for their one House seat. Mary Peltola won under the plurality system. She got the most votes. Wasn't 50%, it was 40-ish, 43, 45, something like that. The other 2 candidates were Republican, Sarah Palin and Nick Begich, and they split the Republican vote. But that's our current system. And our current system says whoever has the most wins. However, because they used ranked choice voting in that election, they eliminated the third place winner, which was, or the loser, the person that came in third, which was Nick Begich. And Nick's voters, believe it or not, more went to Mary Peltola than they went to Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin was a rather extreme candidate, and Alaska voters just didn't love her.
Right, on their second choice, yeah.
On their second choice. So that even increased Mary's margin. So she went to Congress with a true mandate of Florida support.
Alaska support.
I'm sorry, Alaska support. Yeah, the other end of this country. So, that was a beautiful example of ranked choice voting working the way it should have. It could have been either Nick or Sarah winning that election. Now, in the same election, Alaska elected a Republican under ranked choice voting, a Republican governor who was a MAGA supporter, Donald Trump endorsed, and Lisa Murkowski for their Senate, who was a moderate Republican. And they used ranked choice voting in both of those campaigns as well. So it's kind of funny that the Republicans would pick out the one race they lost in Alaska and villainize ranked choice voting, when they also, ranked choice voting worked in their favor in the other 2.
You're absolutely
that doesn't
right.
Get a lot of
Right.
All right.
Again, want to remind our listeners, you're listening to The Skinny here. It's 1148 here on 88.5 WMNF. I'm with Mitch Perry, Ben Montgomery, Ray Roa. We're speaking with John Severini, the chairman of Rank My Vote Florida, talking about the concept of ranked choice voting. Excuse me, and will it ever come to Florida? We're just talking about how Alaska, they tried to repeal it, but they were not successful. Now, let's talk about for a minute open primaries, which we do not have in Florida. We're a closed primary state, which alienates the NPA contingent, which I will say is myself, actually. With 29% of the state voters in Florida are not with a Republican or Democratic party, which means unless you switch to one of those parties, which I frequently do before a primary election, you are shut out. That means almost a third of the voters here don't have a say-so if you don't have an open primary system. Many states do. We voted for this, it was a constitutional amendment. I don't know if people remember this. It was in 2020, and it got 57% support. Just like with Amendment 4 this year, right? Got a strong support, just did not get the 60% majority. Do you support that concept, John Severini?
Yeah, 100%, Mitch. And thank you so much for mentioning that. Open primaries is key. And Alaska actually uses both, open primaries with ranked choice. So Florida, I want to say, I don't know the exact numbers, but NPAs are very close. The number of registered NPAs, no party affiliation, is like 33%.
Actually, no, it's 29% overall independent voters. 26% are NPA, 3% are like Green Party, Independent Party, Libertarian Party.
Great.
Yeah.
So 26% can't vote in our primary elections. 20%.
Right.
That's a huge, huge percentage. Now, Democrats, Republicans have the largest percentage, like 35, if you have the numbers handy.
Yeah, actually, I think it's 37%.
Okay.
And Democrats are 29%, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I am also a no party affiliate, but unfortunately, because of our system, I changed my party affiliation so I can vote in primaries. So sometimes I'll register Republican, sometimes I'll register Democrat, depends on who's running. The problem with that is when I change, I only get one ballot, so I get to vote on all those. There may be 12 different people running for different seats. I only get to participate in half. So an open primary is just the way cities run their municipal elections. Everybody runs in the ideal scenario, what we call the gold standard. The top 4 or the top 5 would advance to the general election. Those are the most popular. There may be 2 Republicans, there may be 2 Democrats, there may be 1 libertarian, third party candidate, independent, whatever. And then in the general election, use ranked choice voting, so we get a majority win. And the combination of those two is what was on the ballot in Nevada, Colorado, Idaho. Yeah. And unfortunately, again, it's voters just don't fully understand it. It's not that they don't like it. Once they do understand it, I've been doing this for 8 years. I give lots of talks and presentations. People walk into the room confused. They walk out saying, why don't we do this? This makes so much sense. It would bring civility to our elections. It would bring more moderate candidates that go to Congress and ultimately can work across the aisle. So that's, but to your point, open primaries, again, I'm drawing a blank on the number of states, but more states have open primaries than don't. Florida is one of, I'm going to say 8 that are totally closed primaries. And there's all different flavors of open primaries. Some allow the voters to go into the polling place and select, I want to vote as a Democrat or I want to vote as a Republican. That's a semi-open primary.
Right. And we should tell, you mentioned a few months ago, about Republicans that really kind of turned against this. And this is a case of, like, I mentioned this in a story I wrote, Frank Hibbard, the former mayor of Clearwater, a Republican. I interviewed him a couple of years ago because, as you mentioned, Clearwater was very serious about doing this because it was very expensive to do these runoff elections, right? And so let's see here. He told me, I'm looking back at my story from Bay News 9 in 2021. He says, I think it makes sense where he says, it also makes it that there's less negative campaigning because you may not be the front runner, but you're hoping to get a lot of secondary votes. So you might not do some of the negative campaigning that I think everybody dislikes, but it also works. And so unfortunately, candidates use it, meaning negative campaigning. But I reached out to him a couple of months ago as I did the story, and he says, I also know that it takes more work on the part of the voter, and I question whether folks are willing to invest the time necessary to be informed on a series of candidates and how they would rank them. So essentially, like you've been talking about how this is hard to get through the voter's mind. And he's saying that, he's essentially saying it's too hard to do it. Basically, I've tried to, because, as you know, he was an advocate of it. And again, I think, John, I really respect your advocacy on this because I think it's an uphill battle, quite frankly. This is a Republican state that has dominated elections for 3 decades now, doing it the conventional way. And it seems to me, until they're not the majority of legislators there's no incentive for them to change the way it's working right now.
Yeah, well, I'm no argument with you there, Mitch. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
I've heard the expression is Florida's going to be the caboose in the election reform train. I hope we're not the caboose, but we're certainly not going to be the next state to pass it. Let me just go back to Mayor Hibbert. Yeah. Mayor Hibbert, great man, love him. He was a great mayor up in Clearwater and very popular mayor. Let me add that. He saw the value of it. I'm not going to argue with his, thesis that it may be difficult for voters, but I will state that in the 60 cities that have implemented it, all of the exit polls across the nation overwhelming voter support. It was easy. I liked it. There's something called a spoil ballot when a voter gets confused and they mark like two marks on one election and you can't vote for two candidates. And there's no increase in spoiled ballots, which clearly indicate voters aren't confused. 77% say they want to use it in future elections. 95% say they found the ballot simple and easy. It's just like any test you took in grade school, A, B, C, or D, what's your choice? And you don't have to rank more than one. That's the beauty.
Right.
So if a voter doesn't want to do the homework, I'm a Donald Trump fan. I don't care about anybody else. I'm voting for Donald Trump. They just choose Donald Trump. There's no requirement here to rank more. But let's talk about third parties. They don't have a prayer, right? The Ralph Nader example your caller brought up, Ralph didn't have a prayer, but he had a lot of support. And even a better example would be Ross Perot, who got almost 20% voter support in what was really a poorly run campaign. So with ranked choice voting, a lot of people like Ross Perot knew he wasn't going to win, so I won't vote for him. Now, in ranked choice, you can say, I like Ross, and I can pick, it was George Bush Sr., it was, in that race, it was Bill Clinton as your second candidate. And actually, right. Bill Clinton won with a minority because Perot siphoned,
right.
took away.
Right. He got less than 50%. Hey, John, we're gonna leave it there. Yeah. I wanted to again let our listeners, if you're interested in this, John, how could they reach out to learn more about ranked choice voting here in Florida, or the possibility of it?
Thank you. Our website is rankmyvoteflorida.org. Just spell out every word.
Right.
We'd love to have you. You can sign up, put your name, stay informed. Get involved, any of the above, but all kinds of information there.
Great.
I know we're running out of time here. I will say that internationally, Mitch, your call is mentioned internationally. It's used in Australia for over 100 years. It's used in Ireland, both places to elect their president or their prime ministers. It's used in about 17 other countries.
All right.
So if the voters in those countries, and the voters in our 60 cities don't find it confusing, over 100 years of use, that's a weak excuse.
Okay.
Because it's coming from people who haven't used it.
All right, John, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Again, John Severini from Rank My Vote Florida. Okay, guys, we've got a couple minutes left to go here. I just want to open up the floor here. Only 2 minutes. The Susan Valdez news from earlier this week. Ray, your thoughts?
Yeah, I wish we had more time with Representative Cross. I think she very clearly said what she needed to say. It is strange. It is really weird. And if you paid attention to the vote, we didn't really mention that, she wanted to be the chairwoman of the Hillsborough County Party, and a week after that, decided she wanted to be a Republican. And it's interesting to be with Representative Cross because she does talk so much about policy, and we kind of avoid the politics conversation with her. And to some degree, Representative Valdez is trying to make that argument, but it is.
Because I know, and we didn't say Representative Cross, because she's in her couple years there, she's definitely sponsored bills with Republicans. Because really, obviously with their numbers, that's the only way you're going to get anything passed in Tallahassee. You got to work with Republicans.
Yeah, but I didn't get to ask Representative Cross this, but she's good at working across the aisle and actually getting things done. I mean, she just does it without any fanfare. So I was wondering, who she likes to work with and how that does work, because we talk so much about the supermajority, and it's real. It's a real thing. But there are so many Democratic lawmakers getting things done for their constituents.
And bringing home the bacon, so to speak. Yeah. Although it's true, they don't get nearly as much as the Republicans do.
It's interesting with Valdez. Remember, she was the Democrat who was with Republicans. I think it was
on school vouchers,
heat bill, or maybe the child labor one. Maybe.
Yeah,
remember?
I think you're right,
and
she's been kind of moderate on some issues. Called a Dino by some. And I saw some critics on social media this week mad at her and saying she's just a Dino anyway. Well, you need more Dinos, okay? Quite frankly, you need numbers, okay? You don't need less. There's nothing positive about what happened to the Florida Democrats this week and her leaving. Yeah, she was very selfish, you could argue, and definitely her constituents who just voted for her, a month ago.
That's the saddest part, I think. Yeah. I think, people really cherish their vote, and I think what they saw there was I mean, people got it. Yeah,
Betrayal,
betrayal
absolutely.
is
I guess I
probably
should
the
say,
right
by the way,
word.
guys, I'm going to be gone. This is my last show for 2024. I've been great working with you all. I'm going to San Francisco for the holidays, but the show will be in your guys' great
Yeah,
hands.
we're
next
going to
week.
talk.
great
We're going to
show
talk
next
buses.
week. Yeah.
We're going to talk hyper local news next week, and that happens in 7 days.
Yeah.
Mitch, have a great holiday. Happy
Enjoy
New Year.
yourself.
See you on
Thank you
January 3rd.
so much for a great year. On behalf of myself, Ben Montgomery, Skip Sassy on the boards, Irene Matthews on the phone. Thank you for listening to WMNF Tampa. Please stay tuned to 88.5 FM because Joellen Shoki just blew me a kiss from Studio One. She's here with Art in your ear. I love her so much, and so do you. We'll see you next week.
Happy holidays, nonetheless.